The Brentwood Union School District would like to start our meeting with flag salute. And Calabrese, would you like to lead us?
Please stand. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you all. All right. Moving on to our agenda review. Do we have any new items or anything to change?
Mr. President, I want to point out one typo that I made. So on 8.1 on the approval of board policies, you'll see sexual harassment at the very bottom, BP 51457. But then if you go to the end of the agenda on 1010, you'll see it there with the BP and AR. And that's because we didn't bring the AR last time. So when we get to 8.1, I'm going to have you cross out that BP and we'll bring it back for the second read next time, if that makes sense.
I understand.
Okay. I apologize for the error.
No problem. Okay, moving on to special presentations, correspondence, and superintendent report.
Well, hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. It's nice to see so many people here. I want to share some of the things that have been going on since the last board meeting in our community. This is a new thing that's out at Ron Nunn Elementary. And this is Mr. D'Amico, who used to be the principal of Pioneer, but is out there doing the halftime TSA position. And they're starting these walk and talk. So in the morning, they come out and students are walking and talking around the play yard before they go to class. It was really, I got to go out there and watch it. They were really engaged, and it was a great way to start the day. So I want to commend them for doing that. I also want to thank the city of Brentwood for continuing to provide and support the partnerships that we have, including some assemblies that come in at fifth grade. And so this was one where they're juggling and then also teaching people how to take care of the environment to keep their interest as they go forward. Also got to see some great pictures out in Mr. Robinson's wood shop class that was there. And I just want to tell the board how often people say to me how thrilled they are that we still have wood shop in all of our 3 middle schools, right? And how much they appreciate that opportunity being out there. This is, we have Mr. Gomez's class here at Bristow using microscopes to look at grains of salt, sugar, and sand. So wanted to capture that. And then here's some peer editing out in Mrs. Graywall's class in 6th grade. I think I do tend to give language arts sometimes the short shrift in my presentations at times, and just because sometimes it's hard to capture really exciting pictures of language arts, but there's so much great language arts work that's going on out there. So I wanted to bring one in. Lots of family events that are taking place right now. So this is the back to school night at Loma Vista School and their social. This was the Brentwood Elementary Bulldog Bash. I really appreciate all the school staffs and the parents clubs that work together to build community within their schools. And it's even more important this year as we're coming back from COVID to get people back together. So I appreciate that work. This is Mrs. Odiasi's science class, and they're learning about systems, but they're learning through board games. I thought it was a really neat way to better understand the importance of systems and how they work. And yet here's another example of a back to school social event. This is at Guerin and their back to school barbecue. I like this lesson, but I like even more the expression of the one kid in the back left there. And so I almost was required to put this picture in, but this is the Ron Nunn 4th graders. One of the things with our community celebrations that have started is many of the students were doing self-portraits depending on the grade. And so these were some of their self-portraits they were showing off. And then this is what it looks like more in 5th grade as they're working on family portraits, and the students were able to identify the importance of each of their family members as they work through that. I wanted to thank our old friend Isaac Montanez for coming in as part of Hispanic Heritage Month. We were able to come and get him to come in and record a reading of Carlos Santana, The Sound of the Heart, Song of the World, for a lesson during that. So it's really nice to have him do that, and always great to see him. I got to witness idiom bingo in Ms. Moreno's class, and so I thought this was a really fun way to teach that. One of the things that in my role that's hard as I was a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teacher is oftentimes you go into classes and you see things and you go, wow, that's a lot better than how I did it when I was a teacher. So it's always nice to see that. And this is our tobacco use prevention team that's out at Edna Hill, where students work with other students to try to discourage them from using tobacco products. And I want to thank Mrs. Kemper for leading that, and the students for their hard work in that as well. And then this is really exciting. It's the first day of 5th grade band out at Cray Elementary, and you can see all the students getting their instrument assignments, so 83 of them to start. So that's really exciting to see that program kicking in. I really want to acknowledge the hard work of the staff out at Harvest Grove Virtual School. And one of the things that they're each doing is they have individual clubs that they do. So you've seen some fishing posts in the past and some art. This is a nature club that's out there where students can come and participate, and it gives them that socialization opportunity that they might not have being involved in a virtual school. So I really appreciate them working on that. And then this is what those family photos and portraits look like as part of our community celebrations in transitional kindergarten out at Loma Vista. And so you can see students giving details about their family members as they're doing that. A tradition this time of year is lots of California shirts coming up to celebrate California history in 4th grade. And so this was Garin School out there. It's always wonderful to see all the parents that come out to help with that day, because it takes a lot of hands to get that done. And then I just want to acknowledge, I thought this was really great. This is Brentwood Elementary Principal Guy Rolfs and Mara Muniz, the librarian, who showed up early in the morning just on a Friday just because to cook breakfast for their staff to say thank you. So I thought that was a wonderful thing. I want to thank Patty Schneider and the ELAC chairperson from Brentwood Elementary, Gabby Castro, who's been working to build that program and build parent input. And so this is a fantastic turnout for an ELAC meeting. And so happy that's happening, and really want to congratulate them on their work. I love these self-portraits from Mrs. Jenkins' 7th and 8th grade classes in digital arts. They're just really, really great. And so wanted to show those off as we went forward. This is a fun story. This is Mrs. Berry out, her 3rd grade class out at Cray, who went out to Westmont. They have a relationship out there, and especially have a relationship with Verna, who turned 101. And so went out to celebrate her. So that's a really special thing. This is also science camp season. And so we just had a group leave yesterday. Is that right? Or today? Maybe today as well. And so our last group, but it really takes a lot of work on behalf of the staff and also the parents who put in the time to go out and volunteer. But it's one of the things that we're so excited to be able to get back to in our community. More back to school social fun time. So this is at Bristow. See the fun things happening there. Thanks again to everybody who was involved in there. It's also the time of the year where we work with Diablo Street Smarts, who comes out and tries to work with students about safe ways to walk and ride and on their way to school. And so they do displays and can give helmets if those are needed. So it's a really nice partnership that they do at our schools. And then I actually saw this today when I was out there, but this is several pictures of the junior coaches. So Marsh Creek has done a recess reset program that they're working with a group on trying to make their recesses more organized and fun and interactive for kids. And so they have these junior coaches that are the 4th and 5th grade students that are working to lead the students out there in those activities. It was really great to see. They were doing a fantastic job. So congratulations to them. This is Mrs. Lucero, who's our counselor out at Ron Nunn, who does an Art on the Lawn program with students. A great way to get students working together, get to know them. So great job to her. And then this is Mr. Holstrom. And I originally put at Adams because I'm getting used to him moving over to Edna Hill. But he started a guitar club over at Edna Hill and is getting some students involved in that. So I thought that was a great thing. And then here's some Bristow 6th graders that were out at science camp. And with all that's going on. And then I wanted to thank Stephanie. Thank you for going out and visiting. I think you were at Garin and Edna Hill that day, but I appreciate you taking the time to go out and visit our schools. And then this is just from today. So we started Hispanic Heritage Month in September. And then this is tin art that took place in Mrs. Rothrau's class out at Pioneer in honor of that. So I thought that was a fun program. And then I want to let everybody know that on September 22nd, we'll be celebrating the Teachers of the Year from the county at the Lesher Center. And so if anybody wants to go, that's available to them. It's not a dinner this year. They're doing it a little bit differently, but it's a great way to honor some amazing teachers throughout the county. And we get to honor our own District Teacher of the Year, Kathleen Brown. So congratulations to her. And then it is coming up on turkey trot time. So it's always hard to show this slide when it's been 115 degrees, but believe it or not, it'll be Thanksgiving soon. And I think if you get in now, you can still get a little bit cheaper registration and join that great event. And that is my report this evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. E.
Thanks.
Any other board member comment or committee reports? Okay, none at this time. In that case, it would be time for public comment. At this time, the public is permitted to address the school board on items that are on the consent calendar, requests for future agenda items, and items that are not on the agenda. Would remind anybody that wants to speak that remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person. While we encourage your comments, unfortunately, state law prevents us from discussing items that are not on our meeting agenda. Public comments can be made at this time or during the appropriate agenda item, which you do take them very seriously, and if appropriate, staff will follow up. Would anybody like to make a motion to open public comment? And before we do so, does anybody else have a card they would like to turn in? Just one?
Move that we open public comment.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we open public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. And we have one speaker, and that is Lisa Bustillos.
Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking tonight as the president of the Brentwood Teachers Union. Over the last year, BTA has worked hard to collaborate with district leadership to improve teaching and learning conditions in our district. Last year was for most teachers the hardest and most challenging of their careers. The efforts made by both teams to improve these situations has been invaluable. Trust was built between our teams and risks were taken that proved fruitful to all sides. Taking risks is all about building relationships and trusting that both sides will support each other. That is something our school district has always been strong on, building quality relationships. Our school board listens to concerns brought and supports measures that create student success. We're building new relationship within district leadership this year that show a new level of respect. Both teams worked hard to write contract language that captures state monies and dispense it to groups working closest with students in order to provide the most support possible. When the state budget came in, we felt surprised and fortunate about the amount provided to enhance schools. We thank the board for approving the contract proposal and district leadership to agreeing to a timeline for our members. As a small community, many of our teachers live right here in Brentwood. Financial gains to teachers means gains for our community as well. Teachers support our small businesses by eating in local restaurants and shopping locally. Recently, district leadership detected a discrepancy in the calculations that resulted in increased costs, notified BTA that this discrepancy could have created a delay in the receipt of the raise that many of our people are depending on. Through their hard work, they're able to fulfill their commitment, and we appreciate the trust in our working relationship. We'll continue to collaborate and labor within our negotiating teams to solve issues. Everyone is here because we value students and we want the best possible learning environment for them. We want teachers and staff to take place in the problem-solving process as often as possible. When we work together as a collective, we are better problem solvers. To do that, we need to be part of the communication process early and often. The sooner all stakeholders know that a plan is forming and are included in the planning process, the better the plan can be vetted and the more buy-in will happen. New programs are often received as district leadership's idea when they should be developed by all involved. A professional learning community is built from the bottom up with the needs of those at the lowest level prioritized and then met so they may provide their best performance. As a final thought, our teachers' plates are full already. So when something new is added, then something should be removed to allow teachers to do everything well. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, I'll take a motion to close public comment.
I make a motion to close public comments.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we close public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to item 8, our consent items. I do believe at this time we have one item to modify, and that would be item 8.2, the approval of the personnel report.
And then also 8.1,
That's right.
8.10, sorry, which is the,
Item
just the
BP
removal of
5145.
BP 5145.7.
Okay.
So maybe pull those two items and do them separately if that's
So
okay.
we will pull items 8.2 and 8.10 at this time.
Will we modify 8.1 due to the resignation?
That's 8.2.
8.2, so.
Yeah. So should we approve?
We'll keep it, but we modify it as discussed.
Yeah, I think probably the cleanest way is to approve, or if you're going to vote to approve 8.1 through 8.9, and then we'll do 8.2 and 8.10 separately, if that's okay. Okay. So you can start with 8.1 through 8.9, not including 8.2.
Would somebody like to make that vote? So-
Okay.
So
It's been moved by Mr. Geddes
Second.
and seconded. All in favor of approval of items 8.1 as well as 8.3 through 8.9?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Those items are approved and
Sorry
so
for
now
making that so confusing.
that's okay. Going to item 8.2. I believe we would just like to postpone one item.
Yeah, so if the board wants to postpone the consideration of the release of a teacher from their contract until next meeting and then act on the rest of the items, approve the rest of the personnel items, then that would be an appropriate motion.
Yeah, it's well said.
Yeah, and I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 8.2 with the exception of accepting the release of a teacher from a contract. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 8.2 carries 4-0. And moving on to item 8.10.
Then the final one, and then I'll be quiet for a little bit, is the 8.10 is approving all except the bottom board policy if you so desire, which is BP 5145.7.
And that will be brought up at a later.
Yes, that will come back next time with the AR, the corresponding AR.
It's actually for first review tonight, and then it'll come back for approval next meeting.
Gotcha.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve 8.10 with the exception of BP 5145.7.
Nice job.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded, and then we approve item 8.10, removing BP 5145.7. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to item 9, hearings and appeals. We have a notice of public hearing.
Michael, this is instructional materials. Is this one that needs to be opened and closed and then it follows at the item? Okay, so it's a public hearing. This is, some of them have to be open and then closed at the item. This one has to be open, give anybody the opportunity to comment, and then closed following.
I move that we open the public hearing.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we open item 9.0. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And there's no public comment cards received for it?
There were no public comment
If
cards.
not, then there's a motion to close.
I'll make a motion to close item 9.0, notice of public hearing.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we close item 9.0, the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to item 10, presentations, reports, and other action items. Report out of closed session. We do have one item to vote on. Oh, no, that's not. That's a separate item. So nothing to report. And then moving on to 10.1, expulsion of student 08-2022-01.
All right, so I'll make a motion to approve item 10.1, expulsion of student number 08-2022-01.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 10.1. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on, item 10.2, special education update. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, board. Thank you for having me. Let me just take a moment to pass to you. Okay. Okay, I'll try to speak softly. I've never needed a microphone before, and when I get very passionate, my voice gets really loud, so I will try to be very mindful of that. I am very passionate about special ed, and so I'm going to really watch my voice tone. I'm also going to make sure I don't go too long. So, welcome. Thank you for having me. We're going to talk tonight for about 10 minutes about our special education programs and review what we have at Brentwood. We're going to start with some background on our programs, our students and staff. So here is a list of our students, the number of students over the years, back from 2016-17, all the way up through projected through this year. One of the things we draw your attention to is the percentage of students with exceptionalities. We remain very steady around the low 13%. In the past couple of years, we've seen those numbers creeping up, and we believe that may have something to do with the pandemic learning loss, where more kids are not where they would be on standardized tests because they didn't have as much learning time as others. So we are right around 13.5%. This is right in line, generally a little higher than the state of California overall, but well within acceptable parameters in terms of other districts around us. Here are some of the trends in our services and classrooms. We saw an increase in our ISP providers. We saw at the beginning of the year from last year, this is a year-over-year percentage increase or decrease. We did see a decrease in our special day classes, some decreases, marginal decreases in others. One area where we did see a significant increase is for students where their behavior impedes their learning. That means that because of their behavior, they're not able to access their education as frequently and as often as we want them to. And we're going to talk about some of these challenging students a little more as we go on. We have a very popular special education department, and so we're very proud of it and very proud of the people that work there. We know it's popular because people frequently tell us that they're moving to Brentwood because of our special ed programs, right? And so we're very proud of this. We believe it's because with your support, we've been able to build out our continuum. And so we have a very robust continuum of programs, from very supportive, functional special day classes where we work on functional skills right up through ISP and general education classes. So this slide shows the continuum, including the type of curricula that we use in each class. In our more supportive classes, we use core replacement curricula through both core replacement and supplemental, right up through general education curricula. So we've been very intentional about building out specific classrooms on the continuum. We could not function without our people. And I just want to thank everybody who, I know there's one very great special ed teacher with us at least, who I see frequently. And I just want to thank everybody in our department for what they do. These are our numbers of people. We are very proud of them. They work intensely hard. Whenever I come into a classroom, which I do frequently, they are focused on children and are on instruction. They don't look up. They notice that I'm not someone to worry about, and then they go right back to teaching. And so very proud of our teachers. They are the reason that people come to Brentwood, without a doubt. So those are our numbers. We have lots of teachers. We're proud of them. We have a lot of classrooms and services at each school site. So at each school site, we have speech, occupational therapy, psychological services, and instructional support or resource classes. At certain sites, we have specialized classes. And so this is just a list of where our specialized classes are. This information is also available on our website. I'm not going to go through each one. We do have, we try to sprinkle the classes throughout the district as best we can. Usually, it may come down to where we have space. All right, so we do have a lot of those classrooms and proud of all of them. The last thing that we wanted to talk about is the state of special education currently and in the future. We see that I'm on a clock here, so I want to make sure I'm doing well with my time. As we said before, we know that we have lots of new enrollments in Brentwood, and people keep coming to Brentwood for our programs, especially for our SDC programs. And so we continue to see students more and more coming into the district that have challenging behavior. They need a small environment with a large staff to student ratio, meaning that there's not that many kids and there's a lot of adults. So we have a lot of kids that are here already and are coming and continuing to come. And so that is requiring us to increase our staffing. It's making it difficult on teachers. They're great, but the kids are very challenging. And so just want to be clear about that and help people understand what it looks like. It's like this in every school district. I'm not going to say that we have any way cornered the market, but we are a destination and people are coming because of our programs. With every school district in the country, we have staffing challenges in special education. So almost all of our positions are filled right now. We still have a couple of open teaching positions that I work closely with Chris on and filling, and we're doing a lot of things to get those filled. We have contracted SLPs, psychologists, and RBTs to fill in for open positions. So we want to make sure that children are safe in the classroom and that we are meeting their needs to the best of our capability. So when we don't have the people ourselves, we seek to contract those people. We are intentional in our activities to attract and retain talented people. So we visit classrooms, we offer training, we offer specialized curricula, we offer as much staffing as we can, we attend lots of meetings. So those are some of the ways we're trying to support our staff. We have specialized curricula for certain students. So for students with dyslexia, we offer the Wilson Reading System. We offer the unique learning system for students with cognitive and verbal challenges. We have computer-based programs like IXL and TransMath, which are adaptive, which help students work at their own level. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our burgeoning preschool program. So we have many, many preschoolers and more keep registering every day. It is a huge attractant to Brentwood, our preschool program. In the future, we predict that staffing will continue to be a challenge. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. There's a staffing crisis in special education throughout the country. So we're continue. Chris and I have great relationship and conversation. So we're working closely. And like I said, we're out there at school sites and visible. We believe that our department will continue to grow. We have a stellar reputation and it's going to spread throughout the area as it has. We'll be probably looking to add more classes and staff members. And so we're very excited about the new school. And we hope to be able to, we're going to have some classrooms there as well, and we're going to need them. We also will keep using evidence-based practices. So we disseminate evidence-based practices every day with our staff, and we're going to keep doing that in the future. As you can see, we're proud of our programs, and we're happy to show them to you personally at any time. In closing, I just want to say thank you so much for your support of special ed in Brentwood and of me personally and of our programs. And it's an honor to work in Brentwood and to serve you for the past 7 years. So thank you. And is there any other things I can clarify or elaborate on or anything like that?
Not for me. Thank you very much, Joe.
I have a random question. Do we have any special education support services through our virtual academy, Harvest Grove?
Yes, thank you for giving me the chance to say that. And I want to give a shout out to Ms. Haig, our principal. We have a psychologist, we have a SLP serving that school, and we have a full-time special ed teacher.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 10.3, our enrollment and boundaries update.
So I have Andrew Bishop online. Make sure my mic's working. Andrew, can you hear me? Can you test out loud, please?
Can you hear me, Robin?
Yeah, thanks, perfect. Andrew is with Cooperative Strategies. He's got a partner that had a family issue that wasn't able to make it tonight, so I'll be covering part of the presentation. Cooperative Strategies has done our enrollment projection work and has done work in the boundary arena. And so we sort of have a team effort to bring you sort of an update of where we are and some of the issues and variables that we all have to work through over the next couple of months. So that's sort of our outlook tonight. So we're going to start with enrollment, and I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, and he'll be walking through those.
All right, thank you, Robin. As Robin mentioned tonight, I'm going to walk through the projected enrollment, what we had projected for the 22-23 school year, and then look at what we are seeing as a comparison for the preliminary enrollment for this coming school year. I apologize. So when we look at the enrollment projections and the enrollment projections we've prepared for Brentwood Union School District, there are several factors that go into the enrollment projections. And I just want to highlight those real quickly. First, we look at cohort survival factors. That is the likelihood that students will progress from one grade to the next within Brentwood Union. And when we look at that, we analyze 4 years of prior student enrollment to track where students are residing versus where they attend to determine how they move through the district. We look at birth rates, and we use historic information from the California Department of Public Health, as well as projected births from the California Department of Finance for the County of Contra Costa. We use that information to help project incoming kindergarten classes. We also look at student generation rates. That is the yield factor of students from new homes constructed within Brentwood. So when we analyze that information, we access Contra Costa County assessors data, determine where our new units have been constructed and what students are residing in those units. So then we can determine what the likelihood of future units will determine or generate other students. We also look at known residential development. So there's quite a bit of projects within Brentwood, in and around PA1, and all throughout the city. And then we also, a unique factor we had in this past projection was looking at the transition to universal TK. So by 25-26, the state has a plan to offer transition kindergarten to all eligible 4-year-olds. And so we had to factor that into the projections last year to estimate where we might be by 25-26 with our projected TK class. Right here, I apologize. These are our cohort survival factors. When we do this, we look at each boundary of the school district and we track the students by grade as they progress. And what you can see here is most of your attendance boundaries have a cohort over 100%. What that means is as students are progressing through, we're actually seeing increases to classes. So for every 100 second graders, we see at Brentwood Elementary, we see 100.2 third graders. So a slight increase. Whereas at Guerin, you see 105.9%. So every 100 second graders, we're getting 105 third graders each year. Overall, you can see Brentwood's cohorts, the last cycle, everything was over 100%. So district-wide, we are seeing students show up, whether they're in new residential units, they're in existing residential units. They are new students coming to Brentwood year over year, and that's contributing to the enrollment growth. With the birth rates, like I mentioned previously, we do track live births from the California Department of Public Health, and that's going to be that first column that says zip code births. And what you see there is since 2016, births have remained relatively flat with you'll see a noticeable dip between 2020 and 2021. In about 100 births fewer, whereas in the 5 prior years, we were seeing approximately 1,200 births. And what that means is as we're moving forward, there are fewer births happening within the community. So the growth is coming from outside. Families are moving in and occupying those homes. In the out years, beginning in 2022, we do use projected births from the California Department of Finance. And you can see those estimates for Contra Costa remain at about a little bit over 100%. So they're projecting slight increases countywide in births going forward. What that means is, along with the phase-in of universal TK, our TK and kindergarten class is projected to increase to about 1,500 students in 25-26. And then from there, the additional growth would be mainly from new homes. We also look at the student generation rates. So again, we track the number of students coming from homes built in the previous 5 years. And when we look at single family homes, in the prior cycle, we calculated a student generation rate of 0.39. So what that means is for every 100 single family homes that are constructed within Brentwood, we're seeing approximately 39 TK through 8 students. And then when we look at multifamily attached units, so those are condos, townhomes, apartments, and other types of living quarters, we're seeing about 18.9 TK through 8 students for every 100 units constructed. With our known residential development, we do get information from the county of Contra Costa, the cities of Brentwood, Oakley, and Antioch, as Brentwood does serve portions of all those cities. With the known development in the last cycle, we had tracked 891 single or multifamily attached homes and 1,428 SFD homes. It is important to note that this does not include all known development or projected development within the PA1 project. This is only including projects in that area that we know today, such as Amber Lane. So as more projects are approved within the PA1 phasing, we will see additional increases to these estimated development projections. This quickly is a map highlighting the known development, which are the yellow projects on the map, versus the areas phased or slotted for PA1, which don't have units or projects dedicated to them yet. And you'll see that the majority of the development in the district is north of Sand Creek. And those are going to be the boundaries that are heavily affected by enrollment growth: Pioneer, Marsh Creek, and Mary Casey Black. And then we looked at how do we phase in the universal TK transition. Currently, when we had done this last cycle in 21-22 school year, the eligibility window for TK was any students born between September and November were eligible for TK in that school year. Beginning this year, that eligibility window has now been increased to any students born or with birthdays between September and January are eligible for TK. And using this approach, we factored in a growth of 66% at the TK level for 2022-23, and then we added in 2 additional months for the next 2 school years, and then we phased in the last 3 months within 25-26, where we are expected to transition to a full 4-year-old TK program. So what does this all mean? We had projected in 22-23 an enrollment of 9,265. That included growth from cohorts, growth from the projected birth rates, growth from residential development. And what we've seen with our preliminary enrollment as of September 7th is we have 9,435 students in the system. And so there has been growth at pretty much all boundaries over what was projected, with the exception of Ron Nunn and Adams Elementary, or Adams Middle School, I apologize. Overall, the students are coming. They're showing up in many boundaries, and it's not easy to determine if those students, when they arrived in Brentwood, if they arrived this year, if they arrived the previous year and are now just showing up in the system now that COVID restrictions are easing. But the students are in the community and they're coming. When we look at the projections by grade level, again, what you'll see is that they're not just showing up at any one grade, they're showing up at all grades. The one item I do want to highlight is with our projected TK transition, we did project the incoming TK this year of 286.65. So a little bit less than we had anticipated, but that does give the
So while he freezes and gets unfrozen, one of the pieces that's really interesting that we look at, and I've looked at this with Dan and Chris and Kirsten, is when we came into this year, we had the last 3 years of data, so we really didn't, we thought we were aggressive in our projections, and they were a little higher. We thought they were too, and you can see that, we're seeing growth across the board. And the other piece is the grade levels are, I'm not going to say they're even, but they're coming in at all the grade levels as well, where sometimes we see primary kids and not the upper grades, not the upper grades, or it's one of those things we're looking at it and we continue to monitor. And while he resets, this is sort of looking at where we're looking at in 3 years. And again, and I'll let him take over in just a second. I'll let you finish, Andrew.
Okay. Thank you, Robin. I apologize for my technical difficulties there. What we are showing here is the projected enrollment growth from the last projection cycle over the next 2 school years. So you can see where we are sitting with our preliminary 22-23 enrollment. And we are projecting that the enrollment will grow to nearly 9,700 TK through 8 students by the 24-25 school year. So again, the growth is happening at all boundaries. One thing I wanted to point out on this chart is we did project a alternative education enrollment of 152. This year, that was based on the number of students in alt ed last year. But again, as COVID restrictions have eased, they may be choosing for in-classroom education as opposed to virtual. And so they may be showing some of those students that we were projecting at alternative education may be showing back up at their home boundaries.
So one of the things I want to thank Andrew for is he gets all this data. He sees it in his head, sort of much like I see spreadsheets. But what they're going to do, and we've talked about this, is we normally do our enrollment snapshot of the actual formal data export that we provide to do the enrollment look really at the 1st of October. And so that's where his historical data is looking at 1st of October to 1st of October. So here in about 2 weeks, we'll actually pull the formal data and do a full enrollment analysis. So we'll get an update of the next year and the out years. We'll have an update on some of the developments that are affecting that enrollment. We'll look closer at, as you heard him say, we'll be looking closer at the analysis of TK. We'll look at the analysis of the cohort survival rate, where the kids are coming from. Have they been in the district for 3 or 4 years? And we'll be looking at some of that data and have those details when we come back in November much more formally. And you might get some of that information a little earlier. So the second part of this presentation, and Andrew's going to stay on because I may get, because they presented this and Justin would normally do this part of it, is now we look at, we're monitoring the attendance, and we know that we're opening a school here in July of 24, a new school. So, we have to go through the process of looking at boundaries. And with this, the enrollment growth we're looking at, we also have looking at, do we have short-term issues we need to look at? So we'll be looking at those things as we share some of this tonight and what we're going to do as we move forward. Really coming back with the idea of coming back in November with sort of a much more formal, some formal options for you to consider. As a reminder, when we work on boundaries, we have a board policy 5116 that looks at that minimizes disruptions to school boundaries as much as possible, creates community schools, provides walking routes to schools, allows capacity for future student enrollment, and looks at balancing between existing schools. So those are 5 criteria that we will start with to really do the work that we do, and sort of some of the samples we're going to look at tonight. The other criteria sometimes that districts use and committees use and boards use is looking at, once you go through their criteria, what's the implementation policies you're going to go through? Are you going to do grandfathering? Are you going to, there's some things that we'll look at and bring back to you. And there might be some other considerations that we look at as we get into the data and realize some other pieces in terms of how fast we open Lone Tree and what do we do with other locations. And then we'll have some community input and outreach opportunities to as we go through this process. When we look at that, is we also know that we have to address the needs of growing population and the opening of Lone Tree, but we also know that with Pioneer is technically getting really close to capacity, if not at capacity. And we know that the amber lanes are opening up across the street. We know that the city's working with developers and finalizing their PA1 requirements of what can be built and how. And then any other planned developments that are going on. And what Andrew talked about earlier, and it's something that he and I talk about all the time when we look at this information, is that if it's a planned development that actually has an application, that goes into the process and for us to count. If it's something that, we're going to put houses over there, but we don't know, we wait until there's actually an application and there's information about what those houses are going to be. And we're not far away from that, but we're not that far in PA1 yet outside of Amber Lane. So as we look at that, and so what I have for you tonight, and thanks to the work that Andrew's done relative to looking at this, and at your station, you have a folded piece of paper, and these are our current boundaries. They're on our website. I just got them so that you don't have to flip back and forth, and we don't have to flip back and forth. So what I have is 2 examples for you to look at tonight. They are examples that are not good options. They're not boundaries they're proposing, but what we want to do is walk through, if we look at these, what are the pros and cons or what are the issues we're facing, even with just sort of drawing lines, so to speak. So when you look at this first one, the turquoise or light turquoise green, and at the top, and it sort of looks like an L shape laying on the top, is looking at just if we carve that out, which means, and see the red line that's diagonal right across the page here? That's the current boundary that would be Marsh Creek on the right-hand side and Pioneer on the left-hand side. And what that does is we just used Lone Tree as the line and said, anybody above Lone Tree, let's see what would happen to the numbers if we just moved those kids to Lone Tree and took them out of Marsh Creek and Pioneer, just for the purpose of looking at the data. It's not something, and we know this doesn't work. So if we look at that, it doesn't change any other boundaries. And it also does the same thing. So everything to the right of red lines would normally go to Adams, and everything to the right of red line would go to Bristow. Everything to the left of the red line would go to Adams. And again, that's looking at that. So when we look at the effect, and so this looks at, it affects Pioneer and Marsh Creek, and it does affect Adams and Bristow as you look at the data. So when you actually start to draw those lines, you have to draw the lines and actually look at how does it affect the kids? What are the kids and how does the count just sort of look? And we know that this doesn't work, but let's look at why. So if you look at Lone Tree, starting in 24-25 when we opened, that would start with 373 kids. It goes to 583 and then 575. So it starts to grow. It doesn't meet capacity, but it starts to grow. And it's a conversation we'll have about how many kids we put there. But look what happens to Marsh Creek. Marsh Creek goes down to 587, 510, and 533. And if I turn around and ask Teresa, she says, yeah, I'll take that. But no, that doesn't keep our schools balanced, so to speak. And you look at Pioneer, Pioneer goes from 935 down to 815, 762, and 811. Well, 815 may still be a little high as we look at the balancing. It could be that we can do something that maybe decreases that number a little bit more. So again, we know these numbers don't work. And if you look at the middle schools at the bottom, there's not a great impact on those schools, even though you see a small decrease in Adams. And you can see that we really don't start the middle school students till 29-30. And that's part of the conversation that we will go through and look at those options about how to truly look at balancing those kids. What I want to point out, though, really quickly is if I just look at the elementary version of this, is all we did is we drew the line at Lone Tree, and you can see the boundary line. And if I ask Twee, because Twee and I've actually talked about this one, she goes, we can't, those people left of Empire, they probably want to stay at Pioneer, because why would they go all the way across town when they could just, Pioneer's a lot closer. Those are those types of things. So geographical boundaries, how many streets to cross, are all those factors that we look into when doing that. So if we were looking at a second option, again, that does not work, what you can see now where the light blue has been adjusted, where now it doesn't go, now the Pioneer line doesn't get adjusted. But you can see Marsh Creek does get adjusted, and Mary Casey is adjusted because there's a little light blue line out there to the right. And if you look at the middle schools, Adam is no longer adjusted, but it does affect Bristow. Again, we know this doesn't work, but in working with Andrew and cooperative strategy and talking internally, it's just, let's look at two examples just so we get an idea of how complex this really is. Just by simply drawing a line, look what happens. Again, we know this doesn't work. Again, this affects Marsh Creek and Mary Casey, and it affects Bristow. So you can see Lone Tree, 390, 598 to 637. Again, the middle school doesn't start till about that third year out. But Marsh Creek goes down to 478, 340, and 338. Clearly not a balance there. Mary Casey drops and then starts to increase again over time, and Pioneer isn't affected at all. You can see Pioneer, so we know this one doesn't work because there's not balancing, and we're not looking at Pioneer. And so when we look at these things, this is just looking at very quickly. And we know that it's not this simple. It's, we have to look into it. And if I were to zoom in here really quickly, and if you can see my mouse on the screen, I'll move it slowly. Each of these little sections is what we call a geocode area. And we know the number of kids because Andrew has that data. We'll actually be able to look at the number of kids in each of those sections and actually play with some different scenarios where, okay, maybe that's balanced. Then we'll run the scenario out and do that. We may come up with 15 we won't come up with 15. We might come up with 5 to 10 scenarios. We'll look at those, and Andrew can then run those scenarios to look at how it actually affects the enrollment. Then we'll come back and say, okay, we don't like 3 of those. Let's look closer at 2 of those. And by the time we come back to you in November, we'll have those finalized out.
And I just wanted to add that there's a myth that there's a perfect option here. One of the challenges always in moving boundaries is that people really love the schools that they're in. And so when you're telling people that they're slated to move to a different school, that becomes challenging. It's one of the reasons that we work with public input sessions, so we're able to explain some of the thought that goes into it and also get feedback from the families that are affected. But in my experience in doing that, it's impossible to do this in a way that makes everybody happy. That is probably impossible going forward. And so we want to make sure we do it in a thoughtful way. We want to make sure we do it with input. We want to make sure that we're looking at the math of it so that we continue to keep all of our schools viable as we go forward. But we also have to recognize that there's real people that are in those numbers and real people that have invested a lot of time and love the school that they're in. So as we go forward, that'll be challenging.
I really appreciate the showing how it doesn't work, because a lot of times we only look at what doesn't work when we're trying to make it work. Not that all the other opportunities have already been looked at and that one school is skewed to be no population or another one is way over, and you have to do that. So thank you for presenting that. I think if we hang on to that along with the changes we're making, it'll help this process move more smoothly.
Andrew, before I talk about the calendar, did I miss anything?
No, I just want to expand on that idea that there is no perfect scenario. There's that's why we have tools. You want to do community outreach. As the district is getting close to these boundaries, we find processes or ways to involve the community if possible to alleviate that tension. But I think you nailed everything there, Robin.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Andrew. So the last slide tonight is looking at, sort of our calendar right now is we'll start really doing this work in earnest. And Steve and Emil will be part of this conversation. And we'll be working really from now all the way through November, which includes sort of an enrollment update, looking at some geocodes and actually looking at some scenarios. And our intent right now is to come back to you in November, not with a decision, but with some options and some proposals of where we are and what we found. That looks at sort of the Lone Tree School boundaries, some other boundary options that we may have to consider because of short-term growth that we'll know by then, as well as some, if are there other issues we need to look at relative to facility changes, and that'll be our timeline to probably we need to do things. So if we have to add some portable classrooms temporarily because of the rate of growth we see now, we'll have a better update in November and have some of those recommendations to you, as well as an update of where we are with boundary options. And then, from that, then we'll be working as late as February, it might be sooner, but some of that, between the time that we present to you in November and really by February at the latest, is we'll continue to fine tune that and work through some community outreach options to get out into the community and share some of that information as well as with you. So while Andrew's still on the call, are there any questions you have?
Well, one, thank you both for presenting. I do have two questions. One on the enrollment. I saw like non-public schools. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, when we look at our kids, we look at all the kids, whether they're attending our schools or whether they're enrolled in our schools, but then we actually place them in a non-public school setting. They're usually a special ed student or a student with some severe needs.
Okay.
And so they get placed. That's what non-public school is. Okay. And the county kids would actually show up on there as well, because they're a public school. They're called the county program versus a non-public school. Okay,
great. Thank you for explaining that. And then you mentioned something around like there's going to be new developments coming, but you don't really count those in the scenarios until there's an actual application. And I think you pointed out something around like PA1. Do we at least kind of think about different scenarios that may take place? Because my fear is that we don't account for that in some shape, form, or fashion, that we might have some negative implications if one scenario goes through versus another, and we would want to perhaps factor those in.
Yeah, I'll answer, but I'll let Dana finish. Is that we work as close as we can with the city in communicating what's going on. We have the most recent PA1 proposal that's gone to the city council, and I've read a letter and given them data relative to what we project would come out of their proposal relative to the number of kids, the impact on our schools, the additional need of a school. And we continue to communicate that relative to what they're putting on paper. Now, I also remind people, and when I talk to city staff, is like, we have a little bit of control as a community, but that land is owned by landowners. It's not public land, it's actually a landowner. And what they want to do and how they develop the land will really, that's what we'll really know then. But we know what the city's stated based on their, I just lost the term again, based on the developmental policies. General plan, thank you.
I think one of the biggest challenges and why we've tried to be involved is that I think there's often a misunderstanding in the community about how the financing of schools works. So one of the things that I'm sure that you hear as board members, that I hear at times, is that, hey, I have 6 or 7 bond measures from Liberty School District and Brentwood School District on my property tax. And how come there's so many where I was before there weren't that many? And the challenge is when developers come into town, they typically mitigate all of their impacts in the city in terms of parks and lighting and those kinds of things. But what they're required to pay schools is typically now less than a third of what it costs to build a new school. So in a new community like ours, absent our voters approving bonds, it would mean us taking for new schools, it would mean us taking existing schools and adding portables on it, because that would be the only viable way for us to go forward. And so it's possible, one of the things that we've been in constant communication with the city about is, if you approve residential development in PA1, that requires us to have a new school. A, we don't own any land out there, and B, we don't have any way to fund that school. So it would require us to go back out to the voters and ask them to approve another bond. And so one of the things that we want them to be clear on is explaining that in their process so that it's transparent with the voters in the community, because I don't think it is. And what ends up happening is the city approves it, and then people are upset at us because we go out and ask for money to be able to build the school, because they think that the developers should be mitigating the impact of that of the schools and providing that. So in PA1, imagine that they had enough students, and some of the maps that we've seen would provide enough students for one whole school out there, right? Maybe a similar K-8 model. It might cost, by that time, it might cost $90 to $100 million to build the school. And our initial estimates was we would have less than $30 million from the developers to provide that. And so we would be in a tough position. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Robin.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm gonna bring you on.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, moving on to item 10.4. I think that's going to be you again, Robin. The Measure B update and facilities.
Look, they're dropping like flies, Robin.
Wait till I get up there. And you don't hurt my feelings, which I really understand. I'm used to it. I got pretty mostly fixed in. So this is an update on Measure B and facilities, and essentially it's just a quick Measure B update. And you didn't get to preview the slides, so this is going to be sort of a surprise for some of you. So as you know, we're building a theater at Bristow, about 280 to 300 seats. So you can see on the right-hand side, you can see where the seating is going to be in the stage area and the back rooms. And then you can see the band room and the drama room, as well as the lobby and the bathrooms up front. And so that you can just sort of feel that's what the final plan is going to be looking at, right? So this was back in June. Yeah, this was back in June. The work that we're doing just before school is out, sort of a picture of the theater where we are at that point. This is just 2 days ago. So we've come along, and this is actually a little more than 3 days ago. This was actually still a couple of weeks ago. And so this is from 2 days ago. So as you can see in this one, there's still some stucco that's not done and some other pieces. And so you can see the asphalt's in there. You can see all the colors out on the front. HVAC is mostly up on there. And most of the concrete work is done. They're working on the parking lot. All the curbs are done on the parking lot over there to the right. I anticipate asphalt next week in the parking lot, late next week, maybe as late as the week after. Because once they get the parking lot asphalted, they can keep the dirt and the sand out of the building and be better, so they have an interest of doing that as well. So you can see it's coming quite along. This is the drop. This was the band room, just after drywall. This is the theater, technically just after drywall. They can see they're working in the theater, getting the drywall done there. Here's a picture of the front of the school just a couple of days ago. You can see starting to look like a normal entrance to the theater. And we also matched the architecture and the style and the colors to the school, which we've talked about before. It's a pretty good match. This is the band room 2 days ago. You can see they got the band lockers up, and the Bristow staff hasn't seen these as well, so this is sort of new. You can see the music storage is in there. They got some other stuff. They have on their planning is this will start to get carpet on Thursday or Friday, if not or that next week. So they're starting on the flooring. So it's starting to move along pretty fast. The issue is still working on some of the electrical and stuff in the ceiling. So they're afraid to put some of the stuff down on the ground with all the other construction to come through with all the ladders and the scissor lifts and ruin the flooring. Here's a picture of the theater just from up on the sound booth. So you can see they're working on the wood floor base of the stage. There's another layer that goes on the top of that, but there's an underlayment and some plywood on top of that. You can also see just beyond the boxes, the fixed seating are in. So there's 3 rows of fixed seatings. There's 4 rows of fixed seating. The front row are the seats that we took out of the old theater at Edna Hill that came out of the old Fox Theater. So there, and if you look just down, sort of just at the bottom of the picture, You can see the telescoping seats that they're installing that are just starting to push out. And they were actually installing the seats today. So by the end of the week, the telescoping seating should be done and all the seats should be in, and either they'll leave them out or they'll push them back because they still have some ceiling work to do in here relative to lighting. So lots going on. Again, you're always welcome to reach out to me and we can figure out how to do a tour and walk some stuff.
Can I add real quick that on January 19th will be the day of the dedication of that theater. So we've set January 19th and 4:30. So you're the first to hear about that. We've had it approved by Mrs. Geddes. So that is the day.
So right now, tentatively, they're sort of slated for early November completion. There's a couple of issues of supply chain issues that have hit them. And so they're working through some of those so that some of the lights and some of the sound system may not be in and totally functional, but the building will be open. And so we're looking at some type of occupancy sometime in November at this point. And as we work through the issues of completion, then I can work with the Bristol staff about when it actually be ready to use for plays. I know they're planning a winter, actually a late fall, early winter play that they're working on right now. So I know they're slated to work on that. We're working on that, but we know that there's some supply chain issues that might affect us just a little bit. But we don't know what the final. It's up to the design build to solve that problem, and they're trying to do that before we get in there. And the second piece, just as a reminder, this is our Lone Tree property. So that's Lone Tree left to right across the top, that yellow line. O'Hara is the double yellow line to the left of the picture. You can see Smith Lane and then O'Hara and Big Basin Drive at the bottom. And the light yellow is the property that we own in that area where we're going to build the school. We'll really be building the school on the large rectangular area to the left of that picture in yellow. And this is essentially the design that is out and is being worked on right now, sort of an L-shaped building. Again, Smith Lane is to the bottom, Lone Tree is to the right, and Big Basin Drive is to the right, and Lone Tree is to the left. This is just an update, just a reminder, O'Bara is our design building. We are currently working with the Department of Toxic Substance relative to the soil around the building. They were out there today. We have to take care of the well and the septic system, which we'll do that, and then we'll demolition the house prior to, the demolition of the house actually will happen probably within the next, I can't say the next month because we got to get DTSC cleared. And until they clear, we can't demolish the house. But we still plan to get that done by December. Right now, they're working on getting all of their plans into DSA really here in September with the idea that increment one will allow them, which is two parts of the planning. So the increment one will be all the groundwork that will allow them doing it two parts. DSA usually gets increment ones fast because it's just the grading work. So they'll be able to get out and get the grading work and do some of get all the utilities underground and all that kind of stuff. And then by the time they get to that, it'll probably be summertime and they'll actually get to break ground and actually start doing the building work in summer. That's their timeline right now with a completion date of July of 24. And we're looking at doing ground breaking sometime in just January here, just a couple of months away. And then with the work happening later this summer or in summer coming up. So that's just a quick update on Measure B and facilities.
I just laugh because we've been saying we were going to demolish that house for like the last 4 years. And in my mind, it's like extreme home makeover, right? The family leaves on vacation and like they're driving away and they're demolishing the house. And so anyway, I want things to happen like that, and it has not, but we will soon have it down.
We're under contract, as you know, but we got to get DTSC cleared. So that company's ready to go. So I'm more excited. I guess they have to do use explosive on the well. So I was all excited and I was told, yeah, don't get excited because it's kind of like a boop and then it's done. So
Do that again?
we'll see. Right. Yeah. That's about what they said. So pretty anticlimactic. So that's all on Measure B and update.
Thank you very much, Robin.
That's recorded too. Dang.
Take a sip of water because you're going next again.
I'm good.
Moving on to item 10.5. One more time, Robin. This is the approval of the unaudited
I got a couple more.
actuals.
I got a couple more.
Well, one more time in a row, right?
Two more they snuck out. I'm taking their names, right? So, excuse me, quickly.
Is that the timer?
Something else happened. Okay. So when we look at unaudited actuals is when the districts actually technically close their books. So when we do the budget in June, when we actually bring you the adopted budget in June, we actually have estimated actuals there, which was presented. And so, and that's really as of the end of May. And so we go through all the way through June and we still get in fact, we were getting invoices from companies in the middle of July. We have to close all that out and do all those types of things. And we can only do that in 21, 22. So a lot of that's been done. We'll actually technically physically close the books tomorrow and close that forever and everything rolls forward. And so unaudited actuals is really our update in terms of where we are when we technically close the books in terms of what we project. Now the auditors will come back and tell us whether we're right on and make some adjustments to that. So when we looked at estimated actuals, we were projecting for 21-20. Again, we're talking about 21-22 last year when we talk about unaudited actuals. Total revenue, we projected estimated actuals about $112 million. They're actually about $113 million. That was an increase of about 317. I'll talk about that a little later. But most of that's really lottery and some other one-time funds that come in after the books are closed, so to speak, in June. Expenditures from about 116 million to about 115 million. Most of that, remember, is we have to book all of our federal money as expenditures. Then when we don't spend it, we have to take it away and it looks like we didn't spend the money, but it just gets moved into the next year. And so you can see the difference in those two numbers there. So revenue to expenditures, because we got a little more revenue in and our expenditures decreased, you can see the revenue to expenditures improved. We're only deficit spending by about $2 million in total. And remember, most of that's because we had one-time money from the years before. So as we spend that, it shows this deficit spending. So ending balance at estimated actuals about $12 million. And that was in March, that was about $13 million. So at June, we saw our ending balance was reduced because of the deficit spending and other issues. And after unaudited actuals, it increased a little bit. So we're looking better. And most of that is because of federal money, but we'll talk about each of those different programs. So as you look at unrestricted, there's really four types of revenue: LCFF, federal, other state, and other local. When we look at LCFF, small adjustment to our ADA working with the county. So we saw a little bit of an increase, not even a student. So it's just how the math and the LCFF calculators work and adjusting that. We, up till really May, we were recording all of that MA money, the medical administrative accounting. We had to record on the unrestricted and federal money. Well, in the last month, they said, no, we don't like that anymore. We want you to report it somewhere else. So now we have to take that revenue away and move it. And it shows up actually down at the local revenue, which is kind of crazy. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Other local revenue, other state revenue, you can see increased by about 182,000. And that's really because when the state closes their lottery books, they can see what the total income is and they adjust that. So most of that is lottery revenue that's not really reported till middle of July. And then we have some other local revenue. One, the MA money got moved down there. We got some increases in leases and revenue. And some of our reported interest didn't come into what we projected. And so that there were some decreases there. So in total, revenue up about $238,000 total. You know, that's a big number, but relative to the percentage of the whole, I'm confident that, you know, we were pretty close to our estimates. And I'm going to take a break here just for a second. I should have done it at the beginning. I need to thank Melissa Guzman, my coordinator of accounting. I know she's not here. I know she's listening in. A week and a half ago on really Friday, she started not feeling well and actually missed she just came back to work today after almost 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so she finished all of this work from home sick. And I just have to bless her dedication in getting all this done and the details. The piece why I want to say that way is if I just look at the federal MA money, you know, there's probably 30, 40 accounts there. So she has to close the revenue of those accounts, each line item. She has to close the expenditures of each of those accounts. She has to create new accounts, move the revenue into those new accounts, and move the expenditures into those new accounts. So really, you know, that might be 100 line items that she has to touch individually to get that things changed. Not because of our rules or her rules, because the state decides, someone decides, oh, we got a better idea, let's move, and states. The other one is, you know, we passed We have money because we get a little EPA money from the proposition. And we actually don't know what some of that revenue is actually till late in June. So that revenue changed. So the LCF revenue is $82 million, but some of it comes in one pot of money and some of it comes in the EPA money. That changed by like $5 million. And that's a lot of staffing line items change that she was forced to make. So just a huge kudos to Melissa in getting all this done. There's some things that I'll point out in this presentation because we were up to the last minute getting this document in, so it was formally on time. And we caught some typos as we worked through relative to just how fast we were trying to get it all pulled together. So again, thank you, Melissa. Now back on the expenditure side of the house, certificated expenditures down about $28,000. That's mostly because we projected hourly expenditures that we didn't realize during the year. Most of those are site-based. On the classified, expenditures went up because as we worked through the end of the year, there was extra hourly, there's some staffing added, as well as just subs and all those other costs. And it's across the board. It's not one line item. On the benefits, that was a decrease really because we have to book all of our driven costs, STRS and PERS, retirement, and even health and welfare relative to what we have budget on the top. And we don't true that up until we actually close the book. So that's where that comes out. Again, a small percentage of that. Supplies down a little bit, really because those supplies are shown up in the budget. We still have a full month of school to go before we close the books. So those things weren't realized. A lot of that is in school site budgets. And so those will roll over and be in those school site budgets. On the services, cost from about 5.1 to 5.4. Most of that is because just transportation increases for the final bills as we worked out through the year. We have to pay out and pay tuition for some of our county programs. That's where that gets reported. And so that's about we had saw a small decrease relative to that. And it also affects the indirect rate there. And so you can see in total, the expenditures down about $90,000 as we close the books. On the unrestricted, you can see the ending balance was projected and estimated actuals about 7.5. And because we talked about earlier, it unaudited actuals, that goes up to about 7.8, which is about a $330,000 increase. But I'll point out that was down from March when we looked at second interim and we reached all of our agreement. We were projecting about $8 million. So we've seen a decrease in our ending balance because of just what happened with subs and utilities and those types of things as we happened from March to the end of the year. As we looked at the restricted side, really, really quickly, again, there's the funding sources, the 4 types of funding sources. On the LCFF, that's really as the county receives taxes based on all of their students countywide, there's a pass-through that comes to districts that are reported on the restricted side relative to county property taxes, independent from what we get really elsewhere. And what we projected and what they came out with was a small reduction. On the federal side, again, that's one of those things where we have to book the budget and we have to book the expenditures. But when we close the books and we didn't realize the expenditures, we have to reduce the revenue and reduce those expenditures and move them into the next year. Again, bless Melissa for tracking and moving all of those accounts. So that's not a money we lost or gained. That's just money that actually is showing up in the next school year as revenue. Other state, you can see that, again, we got restricted lottery came in relative to the unrestricted side of the house. And then we also, on our other local, when the state closes the book and the county closes their books at the end of the year, there's still redevelopment money out there. And that was an increase for us of about $500,000. And again, we don't know how to book that until the county actually tells us what it is. So we take a conservative guess at the beginning of the year based on history. And you can see that comes in and that money goes into a pot that's used on facilities. So you can see in total, the revenue is up just about $78,000 and our contribution did not change. On the expenditure side, on the certificated, an increase in the certificated, really because we trued up the raise on the restricted side, really in special ed and all of our one-time categories where we have people paid. Classified, again, the raise and some additional hourly. The benefits go up because those other costs go up. So those 3 all sort of tie together. No real surprise there. It's just all the things that happened between when we closed the books and getting those expenditures done as we did the retro payments really later in the year for our classified staff and some of those other programs. On the supply side, about $335,000 in unrealized expenditures. And really this is, again, those one-time funds that we didn't spend, they get we close those books, we reduce those, move them to the next year. It looks like a reduction, but it's really just those money move to the next year. And the same thing on services. That's where most of those, we have booked the budget, we have to book the expenditures. We don't realize the expenditures, we reduce those budgets, and we move those expenditures to the next year. Most of that, it really is one time in federal funds. There's a small decrease in capital, we move some money. And then on the other outgo are really tuitions and transportation costs that we have from the restricted side. That goes there. The 384 is mostly our kids that are in the county and when the final bills come in with all the things that go on there. So expenditures down about $1.3 million in total. But again, most of that is the one-time money that moves to the next year. Restricted ending balance because of those changes is up. The ending balance is up to about $6 million, a change of about 1.4. When we look at the components of the ending balance, and really you take the $6.8 million there and the $7.8 million there, and you get that 14.5 at the top, and that includes Fund 17. When you take out the required 3% economic uncertainties, the balance is about $6 million, or the restricted reserve is $6 million. We have to take that out as well. So the balance on the unrestricted side is about $5.1 million. We have revolving cash in stores of about $10,000. We have a board reserve of about 1.25 that we take out. We have carryover on our LCAP dollars, both centrally and mostly at sites, of about $2 million. And again, we're coming out of 2 years of COVID where, and I'm not picking on anybody, we had a hard time in finding subs to release teachers or having people do extra hours. Was that we were on our edge. And so those funds are still available to do that moving forward. That's really why that number is so large. Our medical money is held aside there. We have some balance in our lottery, and then we take Fund 17 back out. So really there's unsubstantiated balance of $0 based on where those monies are held up above. We have 7 other funding sources. Fund 13 is cafeteria, our non-capital projects, which is Fund 17. Which is, again, that money set aside for furniture when we open a new school. OPEB is other post-employment benefits. We have about $537,000 in there. And just to walk down that one, the revenue is really the interest. That money is put in the LAIF account at the county, which is the safest place to invest, but it's got a 0.05 investment return or 0.0005 investment return. It's crazy in today's market. And then we have Measure B is Fund 21. And you can see where we are at the end of the year, about $19 million. Capital facilities is our developer fee. You can see we generated about $3.7 million last year in developer fees. School facilities, that's our hardship money that we have really to use for planning. And you can see we're going through that. And that money will actually be used up this year as we finish our planning for the Lone Tree site. And then our capital projects is Fund 40. As a reminder, when we sold the Brentwood Elementary School that used to be across the street from Liberty High School, we sold that property. Those revenues had to be held somewhere. That ended up in Fund 40. And so there's still a little bit left in there doing some of the projects we do. So this is in front of you tonight for approval. With your approval tonight, this will get submitted. If it's approved tonight, it'll get submitted to the county office. And we will be back in front of you in December with the first interim budget based on what we know as of October 31st. And really what we're watching right now is expenditures across the board. Honestly, we know so we have some salaried agreements that will be built into the budget that will true up in December that'll affect some of those ending balances. And in 22-23, and we continue to watch attendance in ADA, and we'll have some more information about that as we move forward. So unaudited actuals are presented for your approval tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. Does anybody have any questions for Robin?
If not, I move that we approve the unaudited actuals, item 10.5.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 10.5, the unaudited actuals. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Moving on, 10.6, approval of resolution number 2022-16.
I have a PowerPoint on it, but I decided not to. So there's I don't know how old it is. is that we're required to do a study every year, an unaudited actual relative to gamma. And really, in English, simple English, which is not the definition you'll find on a piece of paper anywhere, is to say, looks at how much our revenue and expenditures grow relative to a baseline they calculate. And if it's within range, we're good. If it's outside of range, then there's a payback that occurs, and that's statewide. And if you remember when in May they were talking about at the state level, there was again an issue where there was too much revenue and they were going to have to give money back unless they moved around. That's the GAN limit. And we've met the GAN limit, and the resolution states that.
This is an action item. I'll take a motion to approve.
I will make a motion to approve item 10.6, approval of resolution 2022-16.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded, and then we approve item 10.6. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on, 10.7.
Okay, to mix it up, we're going to have another cabinet member address
All
this one.
right, Michael, how you doing?
My sole purpose is to give Robin 30 seconds. No, this is a quick item, but this is the annual notification that we do that we have sufficiency of instructional materials relative to our adopted programs. So this simply states that we have everything in place and students have access to, all students have access to our adopted programs.
Awesome. I'll make a
Requires
motion. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve item 10.8, approval of, 10.7, approval of resolution 2022-17.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 10.7. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. And Robin, you're back.
62 pages.
Moving on to item 10.8, the approval of the encroachment agreement with the city of Brentwood.
So before that, I want to thank Nicole Clevin, because she has to take all the documents that I provide and put it together in a packet, and sometimes it's not as timely as we technically would agree to get them to her. So I'll just say thank you to her. But it's also, well, I'll just leave it at that. Tonight in front of you tonight is an encroachment agreement with the city of Brentwood. And I know that I provided a deep cover and some other stuff, or an extensive cover on this item. Really, we have an MOU with the city to build a theater on their property and work out an arrangement relative to the land. And Broward actually has an encroachment permit to do their construction part. And bless our lawyers, realize that we need to have this document as well because it's part of the requirements the city has. So this is really the encroachment agreement that really itemizes all of the types of things we've talked about and worked out per the legal requirements of the city and us. And this is also going to the city council for approval in the same manner.
And can you clarify, is this a temporary encroachment agreement just until a land purchase or swap is figured out?
It sort of itemizes that we still have to work, and we're still working with the city. We're trying to find the best option. We have some restrictions that are affecting us in that process on both sides, but we're trying to work through those to find the best. We mutually agree as staff that a solution is we can find a solution. We just got to figure out the best way that matches all the letters and crosses all the T's and dots all the I's, that makes everyone happy in the process. Because there's several organizations at CDE that will be looking at that as well that will affect us.
Sort of like trading for a player to be named later.
Gotcha.
Right. The idea.
Yeah.
Very good. Anybody have any questions for Robin on this item?
I move that we approve the encroachment agreement with the city of Brentwood, item 10.8.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 10.8. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Okay. 10.9, approval of capital lease policy. I'm guessing.
So
this is
I'm going to make
Robin?
sure my filter is appropriately. This is yet another auditing requirement that someone at the state decides is a great idea. And basically what they say now is we have to identify anything that's a lease, identify whether we need to report it or not. So this sets the threshold, and we work with our auditor to set the threshold. So the threshold's high enough that we still have to report our leases and our financial agreements, but we don't have to do all the work that that GASB 87 requires of us. And so this is the policies in front of you to meet our auditing requirements. And then we can follow that and we'll make our auditors happy and be back in line and get to move back and do all the other things we'd rather be doing.
Okay. Any questions for Robin?
Move that we adjourn.
Nope. We have to approve this item. Item 10, item 10.9 is an action item, and
Don't stop for just a second.
I will take a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve 10.9 approval of capital lease policy.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 10.9. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. And finally, item 10.10, the first reading of board policy, board bylaw, administrative regulation.
This is an information item in front of you. As always, Nicole Clevin has done a wonderful job of summarizing the changes that are there in board policy. They're here for a first reading and they'll return next time for action with any suggestions or anything that you have.
Very good. At this time, would any board member like to make a comment or request future agenda items?
I just want to thank the staff and teachers for bearing the hot weather last couple of weeks and making sure that things were still moving smoothly. I did have a chance to visit some of the schools and we'll continue to do that over the next few months, but really want to acknowledge all the hard work and time and effort it takes to do something like that. So thank you.
Well said. All right, if there are no other items, we'll announce that our next regular board meeting will be held on October 26th, 2022 at 6 p.m. And we are adjourned.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks, everybody. Nicole's got a few things to sign, so don't.
No.